वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुक्तापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवान् श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथामृतं तं सुजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितान् नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी नितिनः नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदाय कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामिने गौरकृष्णे नमः हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गे श्रीराधे वृन्दावनेश्वरि वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि नीलाचलनिवासाय नित्याय परमात्मने बलभद्र सुभद्राभ्यां जगन्नाथाय वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। हरे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरु दीनतारिणम्। We will continue ahead with our discussion on reviving love. We are proceeding ahead with the third section of reviving love, which talks about juicy relationships, mundane relationships versus divine relationships. Let's read. Rasa means juice or flavor that we relish within any activity or relationship. Relationships are comparable to fruits, sweet or bitter. Think of someone whom we long to meet and long to be with and long to spend time with because you love them, you love him, he's your well-wisher. So that's sweet. Think of someone now who is very critical of you, who keeps giving you feedback and who stares at you with an angry eye and whom you would naturally want to keep away from. Thus, with some friends, their relationship is like mango juice, whereas with other friends, it is like bitter gourd juice. The pleasure we taste in these relations, friendly, parental affection, intimate, formal, neutral, distant, inimical, etc., is the juice, the mellow, or the rasa. The taste of the fruit is what attracts us to eat it. Similarly, the force that attracts us to a certain activity or relationship is the taste we enjoy in it. So there are two kinds of taste. Bhakti rasa is the taste relished in devotional service to the Supreme Lord, And mundane rasa is the taste which is enjoyed by sense gratification. Mundane love and love of God. What is the difference? What makes love of God divine? Ahetuki. To love God not for any other reason that God will give me wealth, God will give me this, God will dot dot dot. I shall take from God this. No, ahetuki means no cause. Sudama Brahman was poverty stricken and wore tattered clothes. Still, when his wife told him to go to Dwaraka to meet Krishna, he refused to go for asking anything from Krishna. He only agreed to go to get an opportunity to get darshan of Lord Krishna. Despite his poverty, he desired that he should not go with empty hands while going to meet the Lord, and so he carried some chipped rice to offer to Krishna. Thus, pure devotees have no material motives to demand, but they are eager to love and serve God. The next is apratihata. Apratihata means this love cannot be checked. If a boy loves a girl in this material world, then if he doesn't get a high paying IT job, the girl's father may get her married to another boy. Thus, the exchange of love will be hampered. But this love of God cannot be hampered. If you want to love God, there is no material impediments. Ahaituki apratihata. It cannot be checked. You may be the poorest of the poor. Still, you can love God by offering a little leaf or fruit or water or chipped rice. He is not hungry, but he wants your love. Therefore, he comes. Personally, he comes. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. This is Bhagavad Gita 4:7. What is dharmasya glani? When people forget how to love God, that's called as. So when people forget how to love God, that is called as dharmasya glani. Our constitution is geared and wired for relationships. Things are dry, cold, and monotonous, but people are not so. Therefore, no matter whatever set of accumulations, material accumulations one has, everyone feels that unless there are some relationships to share it with, it is meaningless. At the beginning of the battle of Kurukshetra, even Arjuna had this argument. And Arjuna was telling that what are we fighting for? We are fighting for a kingdom. He said, okay, even if we get a kingdom, what good it will do to me? He said, even if I get the sovereignty of the entire kingdom, but you see on the other side, my friends are there, my relatives are there, family members are there. And if I get the kingdom and none of them will be there, whom will I share my opulence and riches and happiness with? And this is an argument which Arjuna is giving to Lord Krishna. at the beginning of the battle of Kurukshetra. So he's telling, how will I be happy? So why cannot be happy? You will become the king of the entire world. But he said that happiness is happiness when you can share it with someone. But when there is nobody to share, what is that happiness all about? What is that sense of happiness all about? So we had one of our devotees share his experiences. He was studying in COP College, Pune, and he was wanting to go abroad. So that was his obsession, and he was preparing very strongly. I mean, he had a good CGPA, and then he was preparing, very hard for the GRE exam. Those days, GRE exam would be, on a scale of 2400, and he worked hard day and night in his slog, and he got a very high score in GRE. I believe he got some 2360 or 80, but it was a very high score with respect to um, anyone who had got in Pune. In fact, for many years, nobody had got this high score actually in the entire Pune. So he was feeling his feet were not touching the ground, his head was held high, and he was completely intoxicated. And then what was happening is that now when he got the score, he didn't want it to stay at home. You So he was not a person who would be, he was mostly an introvert kind of person who would be just with his books and basically meeting one and all, everybody here there. Why he was meeting? So that people meet him and say, so GRE result is out. So you have high CGPA, you have high GRE score. Oh, wonderful. Congratulations, your success, this and that. So, and then you would feel good about it. Yeah. And people say, oh, very high score, you get the top university or among the Ivy League universities in US, admission, so on. And he would feel very happy about it, like that. So he was most happy uh, for 2 to 3 days. He himself told us. And after that, his happiness started turning to be miserable. He was, by the end of 6 days or 7 days, he was absolutely miserable. Why he was miserable? Because he was expecting others to glorify him and appreciate him. Now you see the point. Even if you win a Nobel Prize, people will only glorify and appreciate for a month that much. Is that not? No. Like nowadays, people know very few of the Indian team, members. They are winning Olympics. So how much people will glorify them? Some days. Is it not? Not much, right? Some days, right? But then his expectation was to have more and more glorification. So you see, the sense of happiness was not coming from the achievement, but his expectation was that people should acknowledge his achievement and glorify him. That's where we can understand things, achievements cannot make us happy. And because this boy, he had the habit of introspecting, he started thinking, is this the goal what I was pursuing for so many years? I had dreamt that I will get the highest marks and the highest university and so on, and I'll be going abroad. But now I've achieved it, and within a week I'm so frustrated and so empty. So in his meditation and introspection, he concluded there's something drastically wrong with this kind of material ambitions, this kind of material success, failure, with this kind of material relationships. And thinking like this, he was roaming around in the market. He saw the temple, and he came inside the temple, and he got Bhagavad Gita, and he started, uh, attending the spiritual programs. When he did that, then he was telling that it was then when he realized that yes, one's happiness should be on a higher plane, the spiritual plane. So things, achievements cannot make us happy. Our constitution is geared for relationships. And among relationships, uh, mundane relationships tap our energy. Mundane relationships, uh, yes, rather sap away whatever we have instead of growing. So if relationships are made divine, then those relationships can be completely satisfying. Therefore, we need to understand that the most important relationship for us is our relationship with God. If that is set right, then every other relationship what we have in this world will become much more meaningful and sublime. So the irony of this, look at the irony of this world. People remember those who never remember them. So we remember those who never remember us. And we forget that person who never forgets us. Look at the irony of this world. So we see people in general are intoxicated by movie stars, film stars, sports stars, etc. So they do all kinds of hero worship, uh, or influencers. So these people do all kinds of hero worship. But then all these people whom people are doing fan following, actually nobody remembers them at all. Is it not? But we forget that person, the Supreme Lord, who never forgets us, who never forgets us. So therefore, Krishna is the ultimate object of our love and affection. Why? Because we now sometimes people say that okay, who is the rightful recipient of love, object of love? Then say okay, one who is your well-wisher, the greatest well-wisher, one who is your greatest friend. Krishna never gives up on our case. Can you imagine? Krishna never gives up on that on our case. You see, IIT has a criteria. The criteria is that if you are doing BTech, so you have to finish it off in 6 years maximum. Minimum 4 years is the natural course, but if somebody fails or flunks, then he's max is used 6 years. After that, his registration terminates. So they give some chance. IT is giving some chance, but they have a rule and policy that beyond that they don't give any chance. So everyone can accommodate only to a certain extent. You'll see even parents, they have a lot of affection for the child, and they do a lot of sacrifice for the child. But we see we see cases that when the child is too spoiled or too much of a gone case, then parents may also try to set him right for some time. After that, leave. They also leave. Like somebody is a very big time nuisance. Parents will try to help him for some time. After that, they'll just leave him. Leave him with his life. Like sometimes, like sometimes, uh, like sometimes the child is a muff. He's not even studies. The parents let him Parents children help him.
Cyclone.
Get him admission into various colleges, tuition, this, that,
Last year.
counsel him, or chide him, reprimand him.
Oh.
Give him some, give him some
प्रभु
promise.
बैकग्राउंड चेंज करना था, बैकग्राउंड अच्छा नहीं लगता, जूम पे था ना ये.
So give him some, promise of, some reward or some gift. You can try all possible things. The child is not doing anything. What can do? At max, they will invest some, 50,000, 1 lakh rupees and open a grocery shop for him and just leave him to his fate. Okay, now whatever you want to do. So even parents may drop off the case, like that. But the amazing point, or the important point to note, is that Krishna never drops up our case. No matter how much rebellious the living entity is, no matter however fallen the living entity is, Krishna never drops up the case of the living entity. Therefore, no matter how much degraded the society is, how much degraded the society becomes, how much godless the society becomes, still Krishna gives, still Krishna is maintaining everyone. Not only maintaining everyone, Krishna is arranging opportunities for everyone to resurrect themselves so that they can. Therefore, you will see, no matter however degraded the society is, the opportunity for God consciousness is always there. The opportunity, the Shastric injunctions are always there. You see, any kind of society, any kind of civilization, there are some or the other spiritual principles which are always there. There are some or the other devotees and role models which are always there. Who set a clear-cut example of a pure life. Who set a clear-cut example of a pure life. So Krishna never gives up on our case. Krishna never gives up on our case. So Krishna is our best friend, our heart-to-heart friend and great well-wisher, actually. So he is the first and foremost object of love and worship, of love, actually. So it is explained that, you see, there are infinite and millions of living entities. For each and every living entity, the Supreme Lord expands, personal expansion, to accompany each and every living entity. That is how much the Lord loves us. So you may say, what is the use of expanding for somebody who's rebellious, who's demoniac? But the Lord is expanding. He's right next to his heart. He's facilitating him and waiting if this person, and give him opportunities time and again, and waiting that and waiting for the slightest move of the living entity, slightest positive move. As soon as the living entity makes a slightest positive move towards awakening his real existence, spiritual existence, God offers all help. Paramatma is offering all help. That is the extent to which Paramatma loves us. You see, many times, educational institutes, one of the statistics they quote is that how much teacher to student ratio they have. So the better it is considered. No, somebody says, okay, 10:1 ratio. Another institute says, no, we have 4:1 ratio, teacher to student. That much we care for the student. And somebody says, no, we have 1:1 ratio. Krishna is 1:1. The Krishna's 1:1 is exclusive all-time presence. 1:1 ratio. Krishna is our greatest, best comrade. So in that sense, we can understand the Supreme Lord is our best comrade. He is our best comrade. So much so that the living entity, out of his nasty desires and sinful desires, takes on various kinds of dirty and obnoxious bodies. Krishna accompanies the living entity even in those dirty bodies. You see, there are species, like say for example, a worm in a stool. So worm in stool is such an abominable species, such an abominable place, and the living entity You see that Jiva got that desire and therefore he is given that body. Now the Jiva is entering that body of a worm in stool, and Paramatma accompanies that Jiva also. Who is staying, now who is the progenitor, who is the fountainhead of all opulences and auspiciousness, is ready to accompany that Jiva, that rebellious fallen Jiva in that dirty body of a worm in stool. That is how much Lord Paramatma loves us. That is how much Krishna loves us. So it is said that the Paramatma never blinks his eye. It is said that Paramatma never blinks his eye because he doesn't want to miss any opportunity. Even the slightest of the move which the living entity takes towards spiritual awakening, the Lord is going to amplify it and reward it. So the Lord is waiting for the Jiva to reform, and the Lord is arranging everything for the Jiva. That is how much he loves us. Therefore, it is said that when the Jiva looks towards the Supreme Lord, when the Jiva, he just looks at Paramatma. Lord Paramatma is standing, waiting for him. Lord Paramatma is always standing, waiting for him. So when the Jiva looks, he'll see that the Lord is standing. When the Jiva stands to start going towards Krishna, to start going towards Paramatma, the Supreme Lord, the Lord starts walking towards him. It is explained. And when Jiva starts walking towards the Lord starts running towards the Jiva. Therefore, it is said that if we take one step towards Krishna, Krishna will take 1,000 steps towards us. That is how much the Supreme Lord loves us. And therefore, if we can awaken and nourish this one relationship, we will see our lives take an amazing, no, our lives get uplifted. Our lives become amazingly meaningful, amazingly sublime. We hit the domains and the boundaries, or we hit the domains in the plane of auspicious in such a magnificent quantity, or in such a in such a meaningful way. That's the point. And therefore, divine rasa. Now here two very interesting and important traits of divine rasa are explained. That mundane rasa, mundane rasa is always empty, always dry. And we will see that in any relationship, maybe materially we can see, the more we have expectations or exploitation mentality mixed in a relationship, the less satisfying that relationship is. Just like, say, business relationships. Why formal or business relationships are not very satisfying? Say, formal relationships, relationships, say, between the director of KGP and a student of KGP, not very really satisfying, so to say, formal, no, or some professor HOD, and us, not much satisfying. Or business relationship with the boss, the CEO of the company where we are working, and not satisfying at all. Why? Because that relationship is not selfless. That relationship is mixed with the entire motivation of coming or joining that relationship is to drive some interest out of that relationship. It's a business. Whereas more selfless relationships are more satisfying. Like, say, relationship with one's parents, more satisfying because the selfless quotient is more. Yes, there is still expectation, and that's why many times one may get frustrated with one's parents and so on, or parents may get frustrated with the son and so on, difference of opinion and fights and so on. That may happen, but then now to a very to a good amount, or to a great degree, there is an element of selflessness. When a son genuinely wants to be obedient and serve his parents, give happiness to his parents. The parents for decades they genuinely serve the child. Even though they have to struggle, they may not have resources. They may be struggling very hard, but they will try to make arrangements for the child in a very comfortable way. Make all possible arrangements for the child. So because therefore that element of selflessness is there, therefore that relationship is more satisfying. So that is why it is explained that if the relationship is ahaytuki, then it is very, very satisfying. Now, actually, one can approach God also with a motivation. Now, obviously, approaching God with a motivation is at least better than pursuing a mundane relationship with a motivation. Uh, At least that is there. But if we can take off this motivational, approach to relationship, then we can find much more sweetness in a relationship. Much more sweetness in a relationship. You see, what was the love between Krishna and Sudama? The beautiful example is given. Sudama, even though he was practically dying of poverty and starvation, his whole family was dying of poverty and starvation. Still, he was not wanting to demand the Lord that, okay, I am your devotee and friend. You please give me millions of dollars. No, he didn't want to demand. Well, that is blackmail. Is it not? That's not love. He was genuinely wanting to serve. That in whatever situation the Lord keeps me in, I'll continue my service and my submission to the Lord. So he agreed to go to Dwaraka upon the pestering of his wife. But then he was not thinking that I will ask financial help. He was thinking, okay, at least this is a good excuse for me to go and get darshan of the Lord. So Sudama never asked anything. But what was Krishna's reciprocation? Krishna, when he heard that Sudama Vipra has come, Lord Krishna barefoot started running to embrace Sudama Vipra. He took him by the hand, he took him to his inner chamber, made him sit uh, on his bedstead, and the Lord was massaging his feet. The Lord was washing the lotus feet of Sudama with water and drinking that water, sprinkling that water on everyone. And Mother Rukmani was fanning Sudama. What was their love? This is love. Actually. Such sweet. And Sudama never asked anything. Sudama was just absorbed. He was overwhelmed with Krishna's love. He never asked anything material. But when he reached back, in place of his heart was a palace. But Sudama was fearful to have riches because he was thinking, if I get riches, then I may become intoxicated and forget Krishna, which he didn't want it to do. So Krishna gave him riches, but Krishna gave him mercy that he will not forget him as well. So that is love, ahaytuki, without any cause. Same way Prahlad Maharaj is telling Lord Nrsimhadev. Lord Nrsimhadev is so pleased with Prahlad Maharaj. Lord Nrsimhadev is telling, I want to give you some benediction. Ask anything. And Prahlad Maharaj is telling, oh Lord, I'm not a businessman. That I have worshipped you to ask for some returns. I don't want anything. And Lord Nrsimhadev is even more pleased. He said, this is the attitude which pleases you the most, therefore you have to ask something. And Prahlad is telling him, no, I don't want to do any business. And Lord Nrsimhadev is even more ecstatic. And Lord Nrsimhadev, I am even more pleased, you have to ask something. So this is the love, the platform of love, ahaytuki. The next point or the next principle which is explained here is apratihata. Apratihata. We will see mundane rasa always has impediments, is it not? Mundane rasa. Now here the example of a lover is given. A boy may want to marry a girl, but then there may be impediments. The father may not allow because he wants the groom to have a good salary. So one may have to prove himself to be getting a good salary or some particular status quo or something like that. So there are impediments, is it not? Impediments to what can one offer? Because on the material plane, there is always going to be shortage and impediments. That's why we have to take now we need to see relationships on a spiritual plane. On the spiritual plane, there is no impediment like that. Sometimes parents want to give the best to their children, but they themselves don't have so much money. So there are impediments. Husband may want to give or a wife may demand a lot of things, but the husband may have impediments giving how much he'll solve. Material plane impediments are there. The spiritual plane, there are no impediments. So apratihata, the spiritual love, the love of God cannot be stopped. It doesn't depend upon how much facilities one has. Whatever one has, he can offer to Krishna. One is nothing, he can offer himself to Krishna. That's the point. That's the point. Therefore, it is said that one can offer anything. If one has fruit, he can offer fruit. If one has chipped rice, he can offer chipped rice. If not, one can offer a little leaf, no problem. Even if one doesn't have leaf, he's so poor, he can offer water. Krishna is hungry for love, not for things. So it is said, Krishna doesn't see what we offer. Krishna sees how much we keep back with us. So that's the point. So you see, Sudama had nothing, but somehow he got some rotten chipped rice, which was borrowed, because that's all what he could collect, and he offered that to Krishna. Krishna ate it because he knew that this is beyond what Sudama has. He has arranged this beyond his capacity for me. Okay, so here is an activity. If you see, it says the various kinds of pleasures. So let's give an example of each of them: physical pleasure, mental pleasure, intellectual pleasure, egoistic pleasure, spiritual pleasure. Physical pleasure. So if you will see, these 5 pleasures are in increasing order of satisfaction index, is it not? Okay, physical pleasures, mental pleasures. So let's quickly take some examples. Physical pleasure. No, so you see some diagrams are given here. Physical pleasure may mean eating, drinking juice, or roaming around some place. So physical pleasure, doing some exercise when I feel good about it. Mental pleasure. So one feels mental pleasure in creativity. One can feel mental pleasure in creativity. One sees a beautiful piece of artist. One gets an idea. He feels mental pleasure. He designs a nice idea. Uh, yeah. So watching movies is what? Physical pleasure or mental pleasure? Yeah, it's more of a mental pleasure because one identifies with one goes into the movie and identifies with the hero. No. So mental pleasure. Now it is said intellectual pleasure is more than mental pleasure. Yeah, so relationships, pleasure in relationships, love and all that is romance and all that is mental pleasure. That's mental pleasure. Intellectual pleasure. Now intellectual pleasure is the pleasure of achievement, the pleasure of formulation. So intellectual pleasure is the pleasure of philosophizing, formulating something, coming up with some invention, making startup $1 million company, intellectual pleasure. A lot of intelligence is applied in that. How to strategize, how to work it out. So we see sometimes people for intellectual pursuit they leave behind relationships. They forget relationships. They don't give time to relationships because they find that more satisfying. More than that is egoistic pleasure. No? Yeah, so here you see in the diagram another example is given. Intellectual pleasure, test. Egoistic pleasure. So for the sake of ego, oh, person can do anything. Sometimes person gets hit on the ego, he resigns from his job. Person gets hit on the ego, he says, okay, divorce. Divorce. I don't want to see your face. So you see, people take it on ego. That ego ground is much more bigger. Egoistic pleasure. And higher than that is going to be a spiritual pleasure. Yes, higher than that is spiritual pleasure. So spiritual pleasure is when we chant the holy names, when we hear about the pastimes of the Lord, when we render some service to the Lord. That's spiritual pleasure. Okay, so let's read further. Yeah. So now the question which comes here is that one may say that why can I not feel any love for Krishna now in my heart? So the example is given, it's like a hot coal which is covered by ash. So love for Krishna is an adornment state in the heart of everyone. At present, we are not able to experience it. Why? Because of our contamination by material association. Therefore, the heart has to be purified of the material association, and that dormant natural love for Krishna has to be revived. We do not acquire love for Krishna; we revive love for Krishna. Acquire means to achieve something which you don't have. Revive means to get back what you already possess. So love for Krishna is like a fiery coal which is covered by the contamination of the ashes. Once the ashes are blown off, the fire can be pursued. Similarly, when contaminations are removed, through surrendering to Krishna's instructions, one can perceive love of Krishna in one's heart. So our love for Krishna has to be revived. It's there, it's dormant. That germ is dormant in us. It has to be revived. And how to revive? By practice. By practice. Simple, regular, and determined practice. So here the example is given, how to revive. Child has an innate capacity to walk. But the child has to practice walking. So walking is not unnatural. Walking capacity is there originally in the child. But simply by little practice, he walks very nicely. Similarly, devotional service to the Supreme Lord is a natural instinct of every living entity. There are certain prescribed methods for employing our senses and mind in such a way that our dormant consciousness for loving Krishna will be invoked, as much as a child with a little practice can begin to walk. One who has no basic walking capacity cannot walk by practice. Similarly, Krishna consciousness cannot be aroused by practice. When we wish to develop our innate capacity for devotional service, there are certain processes which, by our accepting and executing them, that dormant capacity will be invoked. These practices are called as sadhana bhakti. So here it is said, if the potency is not there, the person can nothing will happen by practice. Like some people inherently have low IQ. How many hours this sit and study, they won't get a CGPA. We have seen even in IIT, sometimes some students they are studying 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day on the weekday after school hours, on a class hours, and they are studying 12, 14 hours, 16 hours a day in the weekends. Seeing them, one may get a complex that my God, this fellow will hit a 11-point CGPA this time. But if you see the result is he's barely managing with a 6.5 or something. So the point is that a lot of hard work is happening, but the IQ may be a bit less, or so capacity, potentiality is not there. Then person cannot pick it up actually. So that which is artificial will require a lot of practice. That which is, so we can see that actually spiritual life. You see the point. The amazing thing is that spiritual life is like, say for example, if you want to win a Nobel Prize, you may have to work 18 hours a day. 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day for 3 decades, 2 decades, then you may win it. Then there is some chance of probability that one may win a Nobel Prize. Is it not? But if one wants to connect to God, reawaken his spiritual identity. One, a little bit time one gives, you see, one can experience the magnificent leap of awakening. Like, say, for example, none of us are giving, 14 hours a day to spiritual life. Are we? No, are we? None of us are giving. But a small time also we give, we see such a tremendous awakening, such a tremendous impact. This goes to show that this potency is innate in us. It's not artificial, that we have to put gunpowder after gunpowder. It's not artificial. What is artificial will take a lot of energy to work it out. Okay, let's go ahead. So therefore, here there is a beautiful comparison between the mundane rasa and the bhakti rasa. The mundane rasa is derived with the material body and mind, and the bhakti rasa is is derived from the soul seva to the supreme Lord. So the mundane rasa is bamboo biting pleasure. The bhakti rasa is the sugar cane biting pleasure. Material pleasures can be achieved through senses and mind, but they are pale and thin. Pale, dam nahi. Bhakti bliss is oceanic, beyond earthly, heavenly, and even the pleasure of moksha. The mundane pleasures are temporary and fading, like chewing gum. No, initially very attractive, but then it becomes, it just becomes dry. So, but bhakti rasa is sweet and ever fresh. It is called as Amrita, that which does not die, that which exists eternally. It is ever increasing, ever fresh. Now, the next thing which is given, the Bhakti Rasa is temporary. At death, everything is finished, and one has to begin a new chapter of life in the new situation. Perhaps higher situation, lower situation, where it is said one may be an IITian, but when he dies, he may be reborn as a child. Again, he will begin his journey with Baba Black Sheep, Humpty Dumpty, had a wall, sat on the wall and fall. Bhakti rasa is permanent. It does not finish with the end of life. If one has done 60% bhakti, in the next life one starts with 61. Thus, there is no loss in the path of bhakti. Gajendra Maharaj, Bharat Maharaj, etc. continued their bhakti yoga from the previous life and attained perfection and back to Godhead. So spiritual love can be all satisfying and it can completely absorb us. Therefore, you will see in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord explains many, many times that, oh Arjuna, I am going to give you this knowledge. If you act on this knowledge, there is nothing further which remains to you for you to be known. You will achieve everything. Because if you revive your relationship with God, then nothing else you need. And it's completely satisfied and soaked and drenched, overwhelmed with sweetness and warmth and love. So it is a permanent gain. Uh, Even if one, so in bhakti, nobody is a loser. Therefore, actually, Srila Prabhupada writes in Srimad Bhagavatam and in the preface that this knowledge of love of God is so perfect, this knowledge of Bhagavatam is so perfect that it can convert a crude man into a pure devotee. So it is explained that this process of bhakti is so powerful and so complete and so amazing that once started, a living entity, a practitioner, a sadhaka is dragged towards perfection. Dragged, mind the words, dragged towards perfection. The process is so powerful. The process of bhakti is so powerful. There is no loss. Now, if one does not finish, if one finishes at 60, he will start the next life with 61. So therefore, it is explained that one of the nature of bhakti is that it brings a person back to bhakti again. That's the nature of bhakti. Rather, more intense bhakti again. Like that, more intense bhakti again. Okay, so what is the result of the mundane rasa and the bhakti rasa? Next, it is explained. See, here he says, mundane rasa, one loses everything and start collecting all over again. So many great world leaders like Hitler, Alexander, Aurangzeb, they accumulated power and property and wealth of others by fair or foul means. But they left behind everything, died, and were taken to crematoria with empty hand. What is the use of spending whole life gathering some mundane wealth and goods that are going to leave us one day? This is like moving a stone boulder from bottom of the mountain to top of the mountain and rolling it again from top to bottom, and then again endeavoring to start all over again from the bottom to the top. This is not a foolish act. We do the same. Material vision makes us do the same. So, but spiritual rasa, the bhakti rasa, one goes back to Godhead and enjoy everlasting bliss. So, bhaktas who engage in devotional service, they accumulate bhakti sukriti, which is indeletable and undepletable and goes with us even beyond this body, the death of the body, eventually leading one back to Godhead. That's what is explained. That Krishna promises that one who returns to the spiritual world, yeah, there is, hold on. Okay, let me just make it a bit smaller. Okay. One who returns to the spiritual world will become free from birth, old age, disease, death, and will enjoy unending spiritual bliss in the spiritual world. Shastras give example of Dhruva Maharaj, Ajamil, Narada, Bhishma, Tukaram, many others boarding Vaikuntha airplanes and returning to the spiritual world for all times to come. So mundane rasa is bhoga tyaga. As one enjoys a material thing, it gradually loses its flavor and it starts becoming boring. So one has to give it up and search for a new position of enjoyment. So first a man is hankering and dreaming to get married. So after marriage, the couple is quarreling and then they go to court for divorce and then they are eager for divorce. Bitter fight. So the person wanted to get married as soon as possible. Now he wants to get divorced as soon as possible. Bhoga tyaga. After divorce, again after a few months, he'll think, oh, maybe I can, reactivate or whatever. Second, maybe I would have was better off, with the wife or something. So people keep oscillating this way, that way, that way, this way. There was one queen of England. Many of them. One of them actually, she had 8 husbands. Actually, she was trying out one, but getting frustrated with one, then trying out another. So in which the first husband was 3 times, and she had 8 partners. She changed, but then the first husband was called 2 times again back. So 3 times she was there, and then so she rejected, then got someone. Then maybe the thought came that maybe the first husband is good. Then called him back, then revived. Then again got frustrated, then rejected him. Then got another one. Then got another one. Then got the first one again. Then got another one. That is bhoga tyaga. Bhakti rasa is a natural position of the soul, and thus one can remain satisfied there perpetually without oscillation like a pendulum. Happiness keeps on increasing more and more, eternally, unlimitedly, like Hanuman, Prahlad, all wanted more and more service for the Lord, and they were never tired in devotional service. Like Vritrasur Maharaj, sings very beautiful prayers. Vritrasur Maharaj, the same Chitraketu Maharaj in his final life, so he's in the body of a demon, but he's a Mahabhagavad pure devotee, and he's praying to the Supreme Lord. Such beautiful prayers. Vritrasur Maharaj says, "Aham Hare Tava Padaika Moolam Dasat Daso Bhavitasmi Bhuyah Manasmareta Supater Namiste Granit Vakam Karma Karotu Kaya Aham Hare Tava Padaika Moolam." Oh Lord, I only want the shelter of your lotus feet. What I want, Dasa Daso Bhavitasmi Bhuyah. You please make me the servant of your servants. Dasa Nudaso Dasa Anudaso. Make me the Das of your Anudas. Manasmareta Supater Namiste. May my mind always think of you. Granita Vakam. May my words always glorify you. Karma Karo Tukaya. And may my body always serve you. So here, Professor Maharaj is telling, I don't want to leave any stone unturned to serve you. Body, mind, words, everything, I just want to offer to you. That's love. And then he says, न नाकपृष्ठं न च पारमेष्ठं न सर्वभौमा न रसाधिपत्यं न योगसिद्धिं न पुनर्भवं वा समञ्जसत्वा विरहस्य काङ्क्षे न नाकपृष्ठं न च पारमेष्ठं न सर्वभौम न रसाधिपत्यं. He's saying, oh Lord, I do not want the sovereignty of the topmost heavenly planets or that or Brahmaloka, even higher than that. I don't want the sovereignty of Rasatala, Talatala, the lower planets, higher planets, any planet, or this planet. Don't think that I want any of these. Yoga siddhim. I don't want any yoga siddhi. Na yoga siddhim. Apunar bhavam va. Now I don't want any liberation from the cycle of birth and death. And I say, what do you want? He says, samanjasatva virahasya kanksha. I only want the shelter of your lotus feet. That I always remember your lotus feet in the deepest core of my heart. And then he says, Ajata Pakshi Eva Mataram Khaga. Very beautiful verse. He is giving three analogies to explain the Samutkantha which he has to attain the lotus feet of the Lord, to attain the favor of the Lord. He's telling Ajata Pakshi Eva Mataram. Oh Lord, I'm hankering for your mercy. I'm hankering to receive your mercy. Just like I'm desperate. Just like the baby bird in the nest is very desperate and desperately waiting. Now the dusk has come and the baby bird is very desperately waiting for his mother to return back, mother, father to return back. He said that Samutkantha, with that eagerness I am waiting for you. And for waiting for reaching to the spiritual world, for reviving a relationship with. And then Vitasur Maharaj had thinking, he's saying, no, this is not sufficiently describing my feeling. And then he gives the next analogy. He says, just like a baby calf, when this is just born, this baby calf is so desperately searching for the udders of her mother, the thon of the mother, to suck milk. In the same way, I'm looking out for your lotus feet, O Lord. And then Vitasur Maharaj started calculating or started measuring, and he felt, no, this is not describing my feelings sufficiently. No, my feelings are more intense than this, more intense than this. And then he started telling the Supreme Lord that, no, Lord, oh Lord, just like a she lover, a wife, she is very desperately waiting for her soldier husband to come back from the war. And she's expecting him at any time. And therefore, any ahat is there, she feels her husband has come back. Nothing is there, she feels her husband has come back. He said, with that much eagerness, I am waiting to obtain the mercy of your lotus feet, O Lord. So the devotee is more and more eager to obtain the Krishna's mercy. The devotee is more and more eager to serve Krishna. He's never tired of serving Krishna. That is the devotee. And because he understands the nature of the Lord. Because the Lord is never tired of acting in favor of the living entity. So therefore, and Srila Prabhupada said, what is devotional service? Srila Prabhupada said devotional service means to serve Krishna, maintaining a longing to meet Krishna. That samutkantha to meet Krishna. So practical service, but maintaining the longing to meet Krishna. That is love. So here it is explained, the practical application that under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, one should follow the principles. What are those sadhana bhakti principles? One should rise early in the morning, take bath. Now enter the temple and offer prayers and chant Hare Krishna. The purpose of rising early in the morning, taking bath is to worship Krishna in the early morning hours. Then collect flowers, do the worship of the deity, cook foodstuffs to offer to the deity, take prasad. One should constantly hear Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam from pure devotees, not senior devotees, more advanced devotees. Amongst all devotional activities, hearing the instructions and pastimes of the Supreme Lord, Krishna, and chanting his holy names are the most vital aspects of spiritual life that are meant for awakening one's love of God. This practice of Bhakti Yoga under the rules and regulations with the direction of the spiritual master will surely bring one to the stage of love of God. Okay, now here is an exercise, the situation tackling. Okay, so here it is said that Ravi is one of the friends who strongly argues against chanting Hare Krishna amongst your friends. His point is why to impose something artificial. How will you explain to Ravi? So Ravi is saying why to impose anything artificial. So how can we explain to Ravi with an example? Yeah. So any of you, what should be the answer? What should we tell him? So he is telling that chanting is why to impose chanting? One should not impose anything artificial. So uh, so what to answer to Ravi? What will you answer to Ravi? Let us see. Okay, who has an answer? Okay. Yeah, so the story in films are artificial. People try out so many things. Correct. So if we can try out so many things, why can't we try out chanting sincerely? Yes. Anybody tells us watch this movie, it is fun and all that, we go and watch. So and many times one may spend a balcony ticket, or one may spend a good amount of time, energy, but after watching the movie, one may feel, oh, it was not worth it. Why don't we try out chanting? Yes. What else? That's a good point. Yeah. Why to impose something artificial? Okay. So why to impose something artificial? The material condition is a disease condition. So a diseased person doesn't find taste in anything. You will see a materialistically motivated person, everywhere he is chidu chidu, everywhere he is chid chid, he is, a lusty man, greedy man, envious person. He can never be happy in anything. So if he gets $1 million, he's unhappy with that. If he gets success, he's unhappy. He wanted a greater success. He is always miserable. A greedy fellow, lusty fellow, always miserable fellow, actually. So this is the sign of a disease. Just like in a person is disease, anything he eats, it tastes bitter. The tongue is diseased. The body is diseased. So when one takes a tonic, a medicine, and he awakens from the disease, when he awakens from the disease, everything starts appearing to be tasty. This is the point. So actually, Krishna consciousness is that medicine. The chanting of the holy name is that medicine. When we drink this tonic or medicine, then our day-to-day activities also start becoming sweet. Why? Because now it will have a purer motivation to execute. So bhakti enriches our day-to-day lives as well, and gives much more than that. That's the point. Other thing is, just like you see, he's saying that okay, why to impose something artificial? Suppose there is yeah, sending the ways to focus one's mind. Existence of God is certified by various observations. Yes, so chanting is a scientific way, and it is not an imposition. Rather, one naturally fits into it. You can see for yourself that chanting fits into every kind of lifestyle. So you will see that just like our devotees, they chant Hare Krishna, a good number of rounds. They attend Mangalarati, they hear class, they render so many services. Yet materially they are quite successful. Many of the devotees are nine pointers. Many of them are working in very high paying jobs, very respectable. So they are getting good. So materially also the devotees are successful. Now we will say, okay, how the intensity of Krishna consciousness and material success goes on together. Yes, because it is the nature of bhakti that it fits in nicely. Therefore, it's not artificial imposition. It's the nature of bhakti that it fits in nicely. So, bhakti is such a thing that we can do any amount of it, and it is going to be auspicious. It is going to fit in. So interesting, so amazing. And, therefore, there need not be any fear in taking up to intense bhakti, because the more intense, still it will fit in. Rather, it will enhance our material duties and relationships. That is the nature of bhakti, actually. That is how beautiful bhakti is. Therefore, understanding this, one should not allow the rhythm of bhakti to stop just because of any external mundane factors. So struggles may be there, obstacles may be there. Sometimes friends may ridicule. Sometimes some seniors may ridicule. Sometimes elders misunderstand. Whatever be the obstacle, one should continue this practice, because bhakti uh, is what can cure every problem in our life. Every problem in our life. We are inherently having a jaundice disease. Anything we touch and taste is bitter. So the heart has to be cleared of this jaundice, this disease, and the disease is gone. Anything we eat will be relishable. You'll have an appetite also, and anything we eat will be relishable. That is the point. So you see, we have examples. So here is a list of so many devotees who practice bhakti in various trying circumstances also. So this goes to show that in any situation one can practice bhakti. Krishna will give his mercy, provided we take the first step. So who practiced bhakti in the age of in the womb of his mother? Who practiced bhakti in the womb of his mother? Who was practicing bhakti in the womb of the mother? Parikshit Maharaj was practicing. Yes, very good. Parikshit Maharaj was practicing. He was searching for Krishna in the womb of his mother. Correct. Who else? Prahlad Maharaj was practicing bhakti. So Narada Muni was giving spiritual instructions to his mother, and Prahlad was hearing. That is where he learned lecture. He heard lectures. Yes. Sukadev Goswami was practicing bhakti. He was not coming out of the womb, because he was feeling the womb is a better place. Narada Muni, Narad Muni was practicing bhakti in childhood. The second, the B. We don't hear mention of Narad Muni practicing bhakti in the womb, but he was practicing in childhood. He was the son of a maid servant. And his mother very poor, and Narada boy was a small boy. So in their village, four great transcendentalists, Bhakti Vedantas came, four great devotees. And his mother was serving them, feeding them all prasad 3 times. And then Narada boy was serving them. So being whole day he would stay with them, and being with them he got the taste of bhakti. Narada, 5 years of age. Who else was 5 years of age practicing bhakti? Who else was practicing bhakti at 5 years of age? Dhruva, the small boy, he was practicing bhakti at 5 years of age. Dhruva, the small boy. Prahlad Maharaj was practicing bhakti at 5 years of age. Yeah. Who was practicing bhakti in the middle of his youth? The prime of his youth. Obviously, Dhruv Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj all continued their practice in the youth. But in the prime of the youth, who was practicing very enthusiastically? Bharat Maharaj was practicing the prime of his youth, very intense bhakti. Bharat Maharaj. Uh, who was practicing bhakti after succumbing to temptation? Yeah. So one who was vulnerable to temptation, but he was practicing bhakti after succumbing to temptation. He was vulnerable to temptation, but then after, even after losing to the temptation, still he was practicing bhakti. So we can see many hippies, Prabhupada disciples who became devotees. They were doing, they were succumbing to all temptations, but then they took to bhakti because of Prabhupada's mercy. Bilwa Mangal Thakur is an example of one who is practicing bhakti after succumbing to the temptations. Bilwa Mangal Thakur is a very great acharya. So Bilwa Mangal Thakur was, so he was very much obsessed and attached to romance, and and he was very attached to one woman who was a prostitute, Chintamani. He was so attached. He was so attached. He was so attached. He would visit her daily, actually. And one day it was storming like anything. The river was over flooded. There was nobody on the road. Nobody in the river was swelling like anything. So he was so mad. He wanted to cross the river and go to the other side to meet Chintamani in the dead of the night, at the life risk actually. And he was not finding any boat. So he, some object struck him. He thought it is a log of wood. He just caught hold of that, and he floated, and he went to the other side of the river. It was not a log of wood, it was a dead body. He was just caught the dead body, and he went to the other side of the river. So much he was desperate to get Chintamani. And then he reached Chintamani's home, and he was bleeding. He was bruised. He was bleeding, and he was worn out. His clothes were torn. Why? Because he came in such bhishan situations, and the door was closed. He was battering, but so much sound, nobody was opening. So he was still so desperate, actually. So he thought of climbing up the balcony. He was looking for a rope. Finally, he found something like a rope. He used it and climbed. It was not a rope; it was a live snake. Actually, he caught hold of the snake and he climbed. And then he broke the window, and then he entered inside. Somebody was shocked to look at him because his body was covered with blood, and then he was there. He wanted Chintamani. That was his obsession. My God, that is obsession. And Chintamani, she said one statement. Bilwa Mangal Thakur, got awakening call. She said, "What is this? That for this body which is made of flesh and bones and bile mucus and stool urine, for this dirty body, you are working so hard. You risk so much to get this, to get some enjoyment from this body. If a little bit of this enthusiasm you would have showed to attain Krishna, you would have gone back to Godhead. You would have got Krishna's favors." Oh, that was like an awakening for him. Bilwa Mangal Thakur, it was a flash awakening for him, because Chintamani is saying that what is, if this much into this much endeavor and obsession you would have showed towards Krishna, you would have become self-realized. You would have crossed over material world. Bilwa Mangal Thakur got the awakening of his life. There only he made an about turn, and in that atmosphere only he went. He went back not to his home, but he went in search of the absolute, the supreme Lord. He went to Vrindavan. He went to Vrindavan, like that. So it is explained, Bilwa Mangal Thakur, he became such a great acharya. Such a great acharya. To cut the long past time short, Bilwa Mangal Thakur. So in the journey towards Vrindavan also, he got attracted to a lady, lusty, became very lusty. And then, but then he was cursing himself. So he went to the lady. He asked for the hairpins of that lady. He plucked out his eyes actually in his determination that his eyes are, my biggest enemy. Is actually plucked out his eyes, and he was blind now. And he was blind. He would chant Krishna's names, and he was blind, and he would be just absorbed in chanting Krishna's names when he was in Vrindavan. He became such a great devotee, and he would just call out for Krishna's names, and he would not even go for asking for some food. So Krishna would come as a cowherd boy and give him milk and give him food. And Krishna would say, Baba, Vrindavan, nobody goes hungry. Take this milk. I'll come back again. Krishna would give him. Bilamal Thakur was blind. Krishna would come and give him milk. That was the level of his devotion. So he's after succumbing to temptation. So there is nobody so fallen that bhakti cannot pick him up actually. If one is determined, Krishna's mercy is guaranteed actually. Yeah. So you see, even after H, let us take H. Even after many assassination attempts, who practiced bhakti? Prahlad. Huh? Hiranyakashipu did so many assassination attempts, right? As an intimate friend of Krishna, Arjuna. Huh? As an elder cousin of Krishna, Yudhishthir. Huh? Yeah, as a father of Lord Krishna in jail. Father of Lord Krishna in jail. R. Vasudev, yes, correct. So we can actually, yeah, L also the same thing. Even in jail, allowing her 7 children to be killed by an evil Rakshasa. So this is Devaki, Mother Devaki, is it not? So we can practice bhakti in any situation actually. As a vehicle carrier of Lord Narayana, who is he? Why? As a vehicle carrier of Lord Narayana? Garudji, yes, perfect. So one can practice devotional service in any situation, and one will find if we just desire, Krishna will pave the way, and he will give us the ammunition to remove all obstacles in the way, and he would give us the gear to steer our way forward towards Krishna, to steer our way forward, steer our way forward. So we'll stop here. That's it for today. And this completes our reviving love template. So therefore, we have to understand bhakti is the topmost pleasure, the topmost gift, the topmost rarest gift which we have in our lives. So let not any situation, any seemingly fearful, horrifying situation or intimidating situation, dilute our relationship with Krishna, our surrender to Krishna. Because if we are depending on Krishna, by Krishna's mercy, we'll be able to overcome all obstacles. And but on our own, even the simplest of problems we won't be able to solve. So Krishna's love. So ultimate solution to everything is the supreme oceanic love of the Supreme Lord. When that is there, every problem you will see will get solved. Like that. And therefore, no matter how much struggle, no matter whatever situations, we should not let the we should not dilute the practice or bhakti. Just like in BBT, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, proper book printing press. Then there is this nice slogan which I saw, very beautiful hoarding was there. Prabhupada was there, and it said that okay, good times or bad times, Prabhupada books all the time. Sometimes there will be good times, sometimes there will be bad times. Prabhupada books all the time. This is true for the entire process of bhakti. Good times or bad times, bhakti process all the time. Is it chanting holy name all the time, Mangalarti all the time, association all the time, service to Krishna all the time. Hare Krishna. So we'll stop here. I think, yeah. So we took, yeah. So it's a bit late. We took more time today. So you all can be here. Abhijit Prabhu and Shyam Prabhu will take up your class right away, right? Abhijit Prabhu was there, I saw.
Yes.
Sure, Prabhu. So you can carry on. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we will discuss our assignment, graph traversal. So how many of you have completed? I guess 4 of you have submitted. Okay, 5 have submitted. So anyone of you have any doubt in this?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, do we have any difference in code in like